you guys went to the party last night? I had a blast. I thought it was a lot of fun. We did the Rock'em Sock'em Knock Your Head Off nights, right? He won 3-2. Yeah. We're going to talk about hybrid. Rob and I both work at Dell. We'll do intros here in a second. Dell is really focused around multi-cloud. What's the definition of multi-cloud? To me, I'm a Dell employee, but that feels like very siloed cloud, right? All these different clouds are kind of different, like a VMware private cloud is different than the Azure public cloud, is different than AWS, is different than Oracle cloud. I mean, all these different clouds. What we're going to talk about here, and really adopting a Microsoft point of view, is hybrid cloud, doing the same thing on all these different cloud architectures and infrastructures. That's really what the focus of today is. So Rob, I think you start first as far as intros.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Yes, and it's funny too on that. There's multi-cloud and there's working in multiple clouds, two different things. Mm-hmm. And then hybrid.
And hybrid, right? Yeah.
So myself, Robert Sonders, long time at Dell, came through EMC, Dell, consulting with SQL Server since 6.5. So I've seen a lot of versions, every single one that comes out. This one, no exception, 2022. I love it. A lot of really cool things. What I love about this is just right here, Kubernetes, what the cool kids say, or Kubernetes and Linux on Windows. 5-6 years ago, I wasn't doing it, but I'm doing it now, and I love it. And then this is one of my hobbies, and since we're in Wales, Steve and I actually went over here. I didn't find any Pembroke Welsh Corgis. My wife and I raise and show them, but that's our little goofy thing that we do as a wholesome hobby. But yeah, we love it. Steve?
Yeah. So Steve McMaster, I've been with Dell for 24 years, Microsoft aligned as the alliance strategist for a little over a decade. And Rob and I have both been very thought leadership oriented around where we think Microsoft is going and trying to get ahead of that. And that's really the conversation that we're going to have today is we think Microsoft gets it. I work with a bunch of other alliance partners, right, specifically from the data set. Microsoft is really, again, thought leaders around this true use cases around hybrid. So that'll be the focus. And we can just kick off into it. Let's start walk, run, fly, right?
Yeah, go ahead.
So what we find over and over again from a Dell engagement perspective, and for any of you that work with Dell historically, this modernization conversation, specifically around data, whether you're talking about SQL or heck, Exchange and all these different types of architectures, we've been doing that for a couple of decades. And in many instances, it's an end of support, or my license is expiring, it's time to renew. And the Dell team gets excited because they're going to sell a new SAN or servers or hyperconverged or whatever. And they modernize you, like the new thing is SQL 2022, which we think is the bee's knees. It's fantastic. We can talk a lot more about that. But the capability of that and modernizing and updating the architecture and the hardware, and once that's done, the Dell team potentially walks away. But the reality is, for all of you, that's kind of the end of the beginning. That's kind of the start of where this hybrid world is going. Because the reality is just running SQL on Windows and updating an architecture that might have been running off, goodness, we're still running into SQL 2008, 2005, 2000, even further back than that. Modernizing that, getting your nose clean, making sure that you're not exposed from a data perspective. That's just the start of the story, because what we see over the horizon, especially with all this focus around Azure, cloud native, how many of you have an executive or a CEO that said, we're going to be cloud first? All of you, practically. I mean, because they're all reading the bus, hey, we would cloud first. What does it mean? They have no idea. But they say that, and why everything is a service. And well, guess who gets to adopt and implement that? Hey, welcome to the party, guys, right? So that's the reality that we run into over and over again. But how do I run cloud native that I'm running up in an Azure public cloud experience on premises? Hybrid, right? Using the same tools back and forth and up and down, regardless of where it lands. Because the focus isn't so much on data centers. It's focused on centers of data. You want the things that are consuming the data to be orbiting around where that data is. That could be up the Azure public cloud. It can be in your data center. Over and over, it's at the edge, the far bleeding edge. Single server or maybe 2 nodes of hyper-converged, right? We're finding that over and over again. And for people to consume that service, that same service, outside of the Azure public cloud, whatever version it is, EC2, UK, whatever, doesn't matter. The capability of being able to run that is you can't run that off of traditional technology. That leads you into a whole conversation around true native hybrid cloud. And the first thing that makes everybody stumble is it's a Linux world. You might not be ready for it yet, but it's coming. The attack vector of Linux is so much smaller. The ability for it to be containerized is such a fabulous use case versus something that's way bigger like Windows Server. This is absolutely the direction it's going. And for many of you that have history of working specifically with SQL on Windows, yeah, there's a little bit of a polyglot delta, right? There's some different functionalities, some different use cases. But guys, this is absolutely the direction everything's going. And Microsoft really went after this aggressively from a SQL perspective with SQL 2017. They took that entire SQL 2016 codec and they put a shim underneath it and they ran it on Linux. And in many instances, it actually runs faster on Linux than it would off of the same build running off of Windows Server. That set the stage for what Microsoft saw over the horizon around containerization. It's as big as when VMware came out 23 years ago, something like that. I remember 20 years ago when I was selling architectures, I had to learn VMware because everybody was doing this virtualization play. All the Dell guys were running around like Chicken Little. The sky is falling. We weren't going to sell as many servers, and we didn't. But we sold bigger, beefier, more memory, more processor. We actually made more money when that came out. And it was a big technology change. That same sea change is happening right now around containerization. Because containerization is required to create the level playing field for me to be able to plant the things, the seeds that I'm planting from a cloud native perspective. And this isn't just Microsoft. We see this with big data with Kafka. We see this with Oracle with Big Data Connector. We see this with SAP. All the different architectures, including a lot of the system integrators that we work with, are going down this path because they just have to write it once. They write it cloud native, and it runs off of all the discrete architectures that you have. Many of you may be on the Microsoft path with Hyper-V. Many of you might be on the VMware path and looking up that stack beyond vCenter up into some of the capabilities with Tanzu. Some of you may be on the open source path with Red Hat and Linux and going into OpenStack and OpenShift. And the answer is, from a hybrid perspective, the answer is yes to all of those things, regardless of how you got there. And we recognize that for many of you, this is a religious level conversation. That decision might have been made a decade ago on the virtualization technology that you're using in-house. But regardless of how you got there, the answer forward is yes, because they all support that. And so at Dell, we've had to change the way that we actually go to market with our holistic model and change the way that we actually engage and talk with people like you. Because in the past, here at the bottom on the Dell Technologies side, it's historically been very speeds and feeds, right? CPU, how many cores, how much memory can I throw at it? And those things are all still valid and great conversations to have. And obviously, Dell bezels make us ridiculously happy. But in the conversation with you, we got to talk about that entire stack. We got to talk about the virtualization decisions, again, that were made years ago. We got to talk about software defining all the things, right? It's not just virtualizing processors and memories. It's virtualizing all of that and then taking it a step up and containerizing that and abstracting it to where I can be able to run cloud native on premises in your data center or at the edge. That's a different mindset than you might have seen from Dell and some of the solution sets that we've done in the past. And of course, right there in the middle, Windows Server versus Linux. And Rob, I'm sure you have some opinions on this slide as well, right?
Oh yeah, so I wrote this blog with this image that we've used and now dragging around, but to Steve's point right here is where we need to kind of make a change, right in the OS. And it's a good change. Start learning Linux, that leads to containers. Yes, there's Windows containers, I know that. But man, there's a lot of layers here. So as clients, you guys are probably going, well, where do I start? Where do I insert this new workload? I'm trying to get to SQL Server. It doesn't have to be SQL Server. It could be any app. but microservices is. In fact, I just finished a paper where we do this entire stack, and we're doing a lot of papers and a lot of solutions on just this topic to help our clients, you guys, figure out how you navigate these waters. But foundationally, have to have something like Dell. You just do to be solid. One of my friends, you probably know Buck Woody. He's told me this for quite some time. He's like, Rob, Kubernetes has a real problem if the fundamentals and the foundation is not solid. That's why Dell does what we do from a Kubernetes perspective. You've probably all seen this one. I think Bob Ward calls this the wheel of power. I'll kind of burn through it a little bit here. But this is, 2022, again, I love the release because of the hybrid and the agents and Azure Arc. I do a ton of work in this space. We have another one coming up here at 4 o'clock, I think, where I'm going to do some really cool demos around this type of functionality. Who here is using 2022 already? Nobody. Okay, I would encourage you to start using 2022 and the hooks for managed instance. Of course, Active Directory, that rules the world, right? When we don't have AAD, the world stops. But you can hook up your SQL servers right now to Azure Arc if you'd like. All you need is a subscription. You can do that right now. You absolutely can. And start kind of reaping some of the benefits and looking at what's possible, what the art of the possible is inside the portal, inside the Azure portal. So I put this slide together because I really tried to disambiguate all things Azure Arc. There's a lot of swim lanes, a lot of dotted lines, but from a SQL Server perspective, there's a couple things to look at here. Way here on the far left, of course, we have foundationally Dell. All our technologies are validated. But SQL Server here is an option. Does not have to be. You can just monitor servers. Can be physical or virtual. Of course, again, Windows or Linux. Moving this way from an infrastructure perspective, Virtual Machine Manager is the old Hyper-V. A Virtual Machine Manager, VMware for vCenter. Yes, you can deploy very easily virtual machine using Azure Arc down to any ESXi cluster from the Azure portal. And then Arc-enabled Kubernetes. This does not deploy Kubernetes for you, but it provides you the insights and the monitoring, just a view into the Kubernetes world. I use it a ton. I've used it a ton on a lot of different papers, just because of the insights it gives me really easily for Kubernetes. And I start going this way, there's more SQL Server over here, but what's this? This is DB as a service, actually realized this time. I came through EMC and Dell where we had a lot of solutions that were released and said, this is DB as a service. And I thought, no, it's not. This is. And I'm going to do some demos this afternoon on this exact topic. What does it require, though? Kubernetes cluster, probably on Linux. 5 minutes, got it, thank you. So there's a lot on the screen there, and then that future bucket is empty. Why is that? Well, what Steve was talking about, Microsoft is all in with what's here on the right from an app perspective, so more is coming into this bucket, but it needs this layer cake on this foundation, period. Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, so to continue, I was talking about the end of the beginning with people doing consolidation and how that's kind of the start, and that's kind of a Churchill term, right? When the World War II first started and the first actions happened, he said it's just the end of the beginning, there's so much more happening. And then that journey, to continue that idea, this is the beachhead. This is where Microsoft's taking all the cool things from an Azure perspective that makes that little dial turn, so they're very happy about that, and running it anywhere, not just up in the Azure public cloud. So there is a lot coming around that future platform. This will be the soda straw that you'll see more stuff. So Azure version of SQL, not SQL 2022, there's no number after it. The Azure Evergreen version of SQL is at managed instance. There's a business continuity version, that's the equivalence of actually running full enterprise edition, which we'll talk about at 4 o'clock. Postgres, machine learning, there's more things that are coming. Outside of that's cognitive server, outside of that is SQL Edge, but this is the soda straw or the beachhead where everything's coming down. And what you'll see commonly around this at the very top is ARM. Again, hybrid using the same tools to manage public cloud data or on-premises data, Azure Resources Manager, Azure Data Studio. So once you learn one tool, once you're comfortable with that, you use it wherever. Again, the definition of hybrid.
Yep, yep. So all of Dell's Power Star.Star plus Rail and HCI and Apex, our multi-cloud offerings, all validated to work with the aforementioned technologies of Azure Arc. And we do a lot of work in this space. In fact, we're pretty tightly connected with Microsoft right now. And Dell, well, there's a reason Dell's here and none of our other big vendors are, because we're doing a lot of great work with Microsoft right now.
And we did the validation about 1.5 years ago. And what that means is, rest assured that if you're doing a consolidation need, and the conversation we just had around hybrid, you're like, I'm not ready to do that yet, but maybe in 6 months, maybe in 12 months, 18 months, the validation's there. So you can go ahead and do the consolidation need and turn that on when you're ready to, knowing that you're not going to be stuck with a dated architecture.
Yep.
So that's a great peace of mind to continue down the path.
Yep. And then, right, a lot of tools. There's a list on the right there that's kind of a laundry list of things that I pretty much use every day, and you guys should be using every day. Absolutely. These are all, this is that whole polyglot term. Learn these tools, love them, embrace them, because this is what's going to keep your career crazy moving forward. I can guarantee you that. But these are, I move fluidly through all these tools day in and day out. I'm going to do it today at 4. It's a great place to be, learning all this. And then you have the conversations. It's easily to talk, as a data person, you can talk to developers because you're using the same tools as a data person. This really, and this is not the exhaustive list. This is just a lot of the stuff that I use on a daily basis. Anyway, thank you, everyone. I know we burned through our 20 minutes
We
here.
got one more slide, I think,
more
for the
slide.
feedback.
Oh,
yeah, yeah.
Yep, a lot of learning, a lot of papers that I've written and co-authored. The one up at the top is kind of the whole stack, and then down here too.
Infohub.Dell Technologies.
Yeah, just remember that. Infohub.DellTechnologies.com. You can search SQL and get all kinds of info back and real solutions for real problems, a lot of real problems. And if there's something up there that you'd like to see, that maybe, or something that's not there you'd like to see, email me. We'll start working on it. Absolutely, because that's what I do. I love to hear about problems that clients are trying to overcome. And then finally, please, could we get a SQL Bits
Feedback for this
feedback?
session.
Yes, appreciate it.
That's it, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.